Okay, so let's say you're dating someone who seems emotionally distant. They rarely ask about your life, mostly talk about their own interests, and don't seem emotionally connected in the ways that you'd expect. Or maybe they open up really quickly, but it feels out of sync, like maybe they're oversharing or talking about things that don't quite match the depth and the level of your relationship. So at some point, you might find yourself wondering if they're narcissistic or if this could be something else, like autism, maybe. And that's where things can get confusing because on the surface, level one autism spectrum disorder, or what used to be called Asperger's and sometimes is called high functioning autism, and covert narcissism can sometimes look somewhat similar. Both can come off as withdrawn emotionally, reserved, socially awkward, shy, or even self focused. I'm Lisa Blanc, therapist, author, and life coach. And before specializing in cluster B personality disorders, I worked for many years in autism services. And I've seen firsthand how easy it is to mistake autistic traits for narcissistic ones. So, in this video, I will walk you through the key differences between these two disorders. And make sure you watch till the end because I will be sharing my number one way to tell the difference between the two. Okay, so let's start with the first key difference, which is emotional manipulation. Covert narcissists often use emotional manipulation as a tool for control. In the early stages of a relationship, they love bomb you, overwhelming you with all that affection, attention, flattery, and promises. And this is all to fast track emotional attachment. But once they feel secure, this intensity fades and is replaced with emotional withdrawal, criticism, or passive aggressive behavior. And it's all part of a broader cycle of idealization and devaluation where you're first placed on that pedestal and then torn down the moment you disappoint them or threaten their fragile ego. And these shifts aren't random. They are used to destabilize you emotionally and keep you chasing their approval. Tactics like gaslighting, guilt tripping, and selective empathy are very common. In contrast, autistic people may also come off strong at first due to genuine excitement or hyperfocus, but it's not strategic or manipulative. They may idealize you out of admiration or emotional intensity, but they won't typically devalue or punish you when expectations aren't met. If they do pull away emotionally, it's usually because they're overwhelmed, confused, or trying to create more structure to help them navigate the emotional landscape and relationship dynamics. But again, it's not because they're trying to assert power or control. For example, an autistic person may withdraw as a way to regulate their nervous system when they're overwhelmed, while a covert narcissist pulls away when their ego is threatened. They also withdraw to provoke anxiety in you, to trigger your fear of rejection and abandonment, often knowingly, to destabilize you and shift the balance of power in order to get what they want, whether that's attention, validation, services, resources, or whatever. So their goal is to emotionally manipulate you to get you to chase after them for their approval and get you working harder to prove your worth to them. So this is a very important distinction because for autistic people, emotional withdrawal isn't about power or manipulation. It is a response to sensory overload, emotional confusion, or social exhaustion, not a power move or mind games. The second difference is with communication. Both autistic people and those with covert narcissism can come across as blunt, insensitive, or emotionally disconnected in conversations. But again, the reasons are drastically different. Autistic people struggle with social nuance, things like tone, implied meaning, emotional subtext. They tend to speak literally and directly and may unintentionally say things that sound cold or dismissive, but the intention is not to harm. They really do struggle to express concerns and feedback in the socially expected ways. So they may not add the social niceties like softening language or expressing things in a way that prioritizes the other person's emotional comfort. Their focus is often on accuracy, honesty, and clarity rather than politeness. In contrast, covert narcissists are often highly attuned to social nuance, but they use it strategically. So they may seem polite, emotionally intelligent, or even self depreciating on the surface, but it's often a mask for manipulation. The third difference, which goes along the same lines, is their reactions to criticism. So, criticism is hard for both those with autism and covert narcissism. But again, how they respond can tell you a lot. An autistic person might freeze, shut down, or get defensive when criticized because they're confused, overwhelmed, or unsure how to fix it. When criticism is delivered in a clear, calm, and emotionally neutral way, however, many autistic people are open to learning and adjusting. They just need time and clarity. A covert narcissist, on the other hand, takes any form of feedback as a threat. They immediately get defensive and deny their bad behavior. So, I never said that, that didn't happen, and then attack you. They might say something like, you're too sensitive, you're crazy. And of course, they reverse the victim and offender role by claiming that they're the ones being hurt, wronged, attacked. To learn more about DARVO, which is an acronym that describes this common manipulation tactic used by narcissists when they are criticized, just click on the link above. The fourth difference is with empathy. And this part can get really confusing because both people with autism and covert narcissism can seem very unempathetic, but it's for different reasons. So imagine you've just shared something deeply personal with your partner, hoping for comfort and reassurance and support. And you're met with a blank stare or a cold, awkward silence. And you might think they just don't care. And that might be true, but it might not be. Autistic people often struggle with cognitive empathy, which means that they have difficulty recognizing and interpreting other people's emotions, especially through nonverbal cues like facial expressions, tone of voice, or body language. But once they understand that someone is upset, they often do care and they want to help, even if they don't always know the right words to say or the right way to show it. Covert narcissists, on the other hand, often have strong cognitive empathy, so they can read your emotions well, but they lack that emotional empathy, that part that connects them to your feelings and your pain. So even though they might seem deeply caring at first, you'll eventually come to realize that it was more of a performance. The truth is, they don't feel your pain. And so they typically only respond when it serves their purposes. Fifth is entitlement and exploitation. People with autism tend to crave fairness and predictability. They tend to be rigid and rule oriented, but they don't generally expect to get special treatment. Their focus is often on honesty and equality, not taking advantage of others. Covert narcissists, on the other hand, feel entitled to special attention, constant reassurance, and exemptions from the rules. The sixth thing is reciprocity. So, in any healthy relationship, there's a give and take that makes the relationship feel mutually fulfilling. For autistic people, reciprocity can sometimes look different. They struggle with social cues about how and when to give or even receive, especially when they're overwhelmed or highly focused on their own needs or interests. But their give and take is genuine and it's based on their capacity and comfort. They often want to connect and contribute, but They need clear communication, reminders, and other accommodations to do this effectively. In contrast, covert narcissists manipulate reciprocity to serve their own needs. Their giving is often very strategic and conditional. It's aimed at creating leverage and a sense of obligation rather than genuine mutual support. So, over time, in a relationship with a covert narcissist, all the effort will be flowing one way towards them. And the more you give, the more they take. The seventh thing is boundaries. Autistic people may unintentionally overstep your boundaries, not because they don't care about your needs and boundaries, but because they don't always notice those subtle cues that you're feeling overwhelmed or uncomfortable. They may miss when it's time to shift topics. They might overshare without realizing that it's inappropriate. They may not notice when they've overstayed their welcome. These are just some examples. But when the boundaries are clearly communicated in a kind and respectful way, most autistic people genuinely want to honor your boundaries. They just need explicit clarity, not subtle hints. Covert narcissists, on the other hand, no matter how clearly you communicate your boundaries, will ignore them on purpose, especially when those boundaries threaten their access to resources and emotional supply. So, if you try to set limits with a covert narcissist, you will get pushback, guilt tripping, passive aggression, or sudden withdrawal meant to make you feel bad and punishing you for expressing your needs and upholding your boundaries and having the nerve to question and limit their control over you. So, one way to get clarity between whether or not it's autism or covert narcissism, so this is not a diagnosis, but just a useful tool, and that's the empathy in action test. So, before approaching the person, set an intention to try expressing a vulnerable feeling directly and calmly. So, something like, when you walked away while I was upset, I felt really alone. Like what I was saying and feeling didn't really matter to you. Can we talk about it? And then observe. If it's autism, the response might seem awkward, delayed, or even confused, but often there are signs of genuine concern, a thoughtful pause, an attempt to understand, or questions aimed at clarifying what actually happened and what you mean. So they might initially come off as defensive or struggle to express themselves clearly. But typically, there is that desire to understand you and repair the situation, especially if you're communicating that concern respectfully and clearly. With a covert narcissist, no matter how carefully you express yourself, any concern or vulnerability will be turned against you. So, in this example, a covert narcissist might say, I didn't say anything wrong. Why are you so hypersensitive? You really need to deal with your past trauma because I'm really tired of walking on eggshells around you. So, at the end of the day, the best way to tell the difference isn't in how someone acts in one moment. It's how they respond over time, especially when you're vulnerable. Are they trying to understand and repair? Or are they just deflecting, blaming, attacking, punishing, and finding all kinds of creative ways to use your vulnerabilities against you? If you found this video helpful, please like, comment, subscribe, and to learn more about the traits and symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder, please click on the link above.